Okay, good afternoon and welcome to today's second virtual design review panel meeting. On our agenda, we have development proposal for 173 Jackson Street East and combined with 36 to 48 Ferguson Avenue South in Hamilton. I am Edward Winter, urban designer with the City of Hamilton and hosting this meeting. We have David Cluzio from our design review panel who will chair this meeting. In addition to our panel members, we have the applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and the media observing this meeting. Members of the public are welcome here today for observing, but no commenting or questions from the public today. This meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the City of Hamilton's Design Review Panel webpage. Lastly, reminder to our panelists to keep your microphones muted while not speaking. Thank you everyone for attending today. David, please begin the meeting when you're ready.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Edward, can you confirm that the session is being recorded?
Yes, I confirm we are recording.
And are there any changes to the agenda today?
No changes.
Okay, I'll assume by silence that there is no conflict with any of the panel members with this presentation. Okay, on the agenda today is not 8 Shoreview Place. I think it's 175 Jackson, 48 Ferguson. And the lead planner on the file is Elena Baldessera, who's available to answer any policy questions, and Edward Winter will make a brief presentation. Edward, if you're ready to go, please keep your presentation under 5 minutes.
All right, yes, as said, 173 Jackson Street East and combined with 36 and 48 Ferguson Ave South. Okay, our proposed development today is a mixed-use building consisting of a 30-story tower with step-backs at the 7th and 13th levels. There is a proposed 3-story podium and proposal including 402 residential dwelling units and 271 parking spaces and 198 bike parking spaces. The overview aerial photo is showing the subject lands there with a red rectangle and black star. Okay. Photograph showing the subject site from the northwest. Conceptual site plan showing the light square as the tower with lower areas with the rectangle in slightly light blue, and our 3-story podium shown in darker blue. There's also a laneway to the north side, and of course we have Ferguson Ave to the right and Jackson Street East to the south. In terms of our policy area, this is part of the Downtown Hamilton Secondary Plan, and it's downtown mixed use. Again, the property is shown in with X. And then as far as the building heights, we are in high-rise 2 area. For today's discussion, we have 3 questions. Does the ground floor commercial area on Ferguson Avenue South and the large amenity space along Jackson Street East effectively provide an active street front and pedestrian realm? Is the commercial unit appropriate along Jackson Street East? Does the podium, particularly the 2nd and 3rd floors, effectively animate the street, or could a relocation of amenity space in residential units be more appropriate in these locations? And lastly, how does the proposed massing manage the impact of shadow and wind on the public areas surrounding the project, and also at the amenity spaces on the low roof terraces? All right, that concludes the staff presentation. I'll stop sharing now.
Okay, I guess we can turn over to the applicant, and I'd ask if you could keep your presentation to 10 minutes or less.
Certainly. Good afternoon again, members of the panel. My name is Matt Johnston, Registered Professional Planner with Urban Solutions, joined by my colleague Spencer McKay of our team. And as I mentioned earlier, we have Barry Graziani and Rob Lincoln of GNC Architects. We have Kathy Zhu of White House Urban Design, and of course, Mr. David Eckler, our Built Cultural Heritage Consultant, to answer any questions. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Barry and Rob. And I'll start sharing on your behalf.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon again, everyone. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Matt. The context plan. So Jackson to the bottom of the page on the south side, the development site is at the northwest corner of Jackson and Ferguson. Next slide, please. So what we have here at Jackson on the bottom of the page, Ferguson to the right, you can see a hatched area along the north or top of the page, as well as on the east side. On the north, we are setting back the actual built form so that we can create a proper width for the laneway through the whole site to bring it up to 6 meters. And then on the east side, you can see in the dark red, that is the heritage facade that is currently located along the limits of the property line along the laneway and along Ferguson. So the approach here is that we would be tearing down that heritage facade and reconstructing it, moving it west and south so that we can allow for the laneway width as well as the continuous pedestrian, width along Ferguson. And then 30-story tower that steps down to 13 on the north and the west, and then 7 beyond that. And next slide, please. Parking is provided below grade in 4 levels and above grade in 3 levels. Next slide, please. So here we have the ground floor. We would be providing access for the actual residential development from the corner. So the lobby has been located on the corner, fronting onto Ferguson and Jackson. And then the frontage along Jackson has our indoor amenity spaces located along there with access to the parking structure above and below grade at the far west end of the Jackson Street facade. Going up Ferguson, we have a retail space and then access to the laneway, which would provide access for our servicing functions and a secondary entry to the parking structure. Next slide, please. Here we have the second floor, which would have another level of amenity space, indoor amenity space, and then the remainder of the podium is fronted with residential units along the street frontages. Next slide. As we carry up above the 3rd floor, parking structure is 3 floors high. So on the 4th floor, we have an opportunity for some outdoor amenity space. So we are adding some additional indoor amenity space on this level, and then the remainder with residential units. And next slide shows the typical floors of the podium for the 6th and 7th floor. And then on the next slide is where the podium starts to pull back on the west and the north ends up to the 13th floor. And the next slide, we are into the typical floor plate made up of 12 units per floor and a 750 square meter floor plate size. Next slide, please. Here we have the elevations. So we're starting with the west elevations. So on the bottom of the page, you can see where the gray is. That's where we are butting up against the already existing neighbor that we have to the west in their parking structure. Next slide. This is the south elevation along Jackson. So you can see the clear definition of the 3-story podium, and then the podium that continues up to the 7th floor where it is pulled back, going up to the 13th, and then the tower up to 30. Next slide, please. This is just zooming in to that same elevation. The treatment of the 3-story podium is taking its cues from the Heritage Building with the simplicity of the brick frames being carried on around the rest of the podium and the base of the building. Next slide, please. This would be the Ferguson elevation. Next slide. Which shows the reconstructed heritage facade in its relocated place. And it'll have a three-dimensional form to it, so it does actually return along the south facade as part of the entrance into the building. Next slide. This would be the laneway portion or the north elevation of the development. So the heritage building turning the corner. And if we go to the next slide, in the section, you can just see how floors are working out and the two-story lobby, which allows us to slip in the extra level of parking in behind. And then next slide. This is a perspective view looking southwest. So the heritage, reconstructed heritage building on the corner, and then the remainder of the three-story podium beyond further to the west. Next slide. This is showing the tower from further away, three-dimensionally. The form that that you see with the zigzag pattern going up the tower, with the idea of reducing the amount of actual vision glazing on the tower rather than going with a vertical or a horizontal architectural language, we are taking this approach, which has a more dynamic look. And it helps us also reduce the clear fenestration for the tower in a different way. Next slide, please. Here's a view from further out, how the tower is going to look in situation and context. And next slide. Just closer in, so you can see how the pattern that it actually starts and it wraps right around all four sides of the tower, and it actually extends up to integrate the mechanical penthouse into the architecture of the tower. And next slide. This, I'll pass it over to Kathy so she can speak to the landscaping.
Everyone, I'll just be providing a brief overview of the streetscape design along Jackson and Ferguson. Overall, our focus was to preserve the existing trees in this intersection while supplementing where possible to create a tree-lined streetscape along Ferguson Avenue South. Where there isn't enough room to plant street trees, we're proposing a vegetative buffer along Jackson Street, adding diverse and colorful textures throughout the year, and providing privacy while maintaining clear views from the building. Additionally, outdoor rooftop amenity spaces will be provided on the 4th and 14th stories, which will feature outdoor dining and lounging areas. And that's it for the landscape portion.
Thanks, Kathy. Back over to you, David, as chair.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I'll turn it over to the panelists for questions, and the first panelist is Eldon.
Thanks for the presentation. If we could bring the plan back up, I just have some questions of clarity.
Certainly.
Which floor are you looking for, Eldon?
I think I'm looking for the 7th floor. Where the podium starts to step away from the building. Further down. Yeah, okay, yeah. So
this is 4th floor.
Okay, 4th floor. Can we go to the next page? And the next
6
one?
to 7, and this is 9 to 13.
So I would, from the architectural set that I had, I thought there was a terrace on that that wing component to the property line. Is there no terrace?
Yes.
You mean on the left there?
That would be
Yeah,
on the
left.
8th floor. On the 8th floor, there would be a terrace on
Okay,
the
it's
west
just
end.
not
and
part of
then-
the.
Well, we're showing the
presentation package?
9th floor just to show you what the typical, but on the 8th, there would be a terrace.
Understood. And then with respect to the I guess I don't know if this is north. Yeah, this is north. The north property line. I think you've shown setbacks from the new property line. But can you confirm like what your setbacks are from the existing property line?
It would be, hang on, it's the 2.4 is what we are setting back from the property line at grade, and then an additional 3 meters here, so it'd be 5.4 total.
And then in doing these and proposing these setbacks, like, have you like what I've looked at your proposals and you've shown the the development to the west. Have there been considerations for the future development to the north? Has that been contemplated as part of this overall plan?
We have not specifically looked at any layouts for the property to the north. No, we have not. But are you, I'm just trying to understand where you're going with your question.
I'm trying to understand whether this development protects for development to the north. And I'm trying to understand your setbacks and how they relate to, I guess, both the lane and future property lines. If you can help me understand that.
Okay, so the setback of the podium from our north property line for the 6th and 7th floor, as I mentioned, is 5.4 meters. And then there is the portion of the laneway that exists currently, which is an additional 3.6 meters. That's the existing width of the lane, 3.6 meters. So from the north property line of the property to the north, we would be set back a total of 9 meters to our podium at the 6th and 7th floor.
How about the 4th floor?
On the 4th floor, we would be set back 6 meters from that north property line.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
I could just elaborate that we have applied the tall building design guidelines in relation to required step backs, when we get north of 44 meters in height. So we certainly took our cues from there.
Thanks, Matt.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thanks, David. Thank you for your presentations. A couple of questions. I'm wondering if there is any minor variance required here, because it seems that you're meeting height, required parking, and setbacks as far as were presented in the summary sheet. So maybe that's a question for the city or for you at Graziano and Kratza.
Matt, as far as I know, we don't have any variances that we need on this, do we?
Right. By and large, height, tower separation, building step backs are aligned with the zoning bylaw. We are waiting for a zoning compliance review exercise that would formally identify, there may be some nitpicky technical variances within the parking structure itself, et cetera. But again, we won't have that confirmed until we have the zoning bylaw review complete.
Okay. And another question, similar to our last session, are there any sustainability initiatives incorporated into this scheme so far?
Not yet. We haven't gotten into that level of detail yet.
Okay, that's all the questions from me at the moment. Thank you.
Jen Sisson.
Thanks. Thank you for your presentations. It looks like you've provided more parking than is required. I was hoping you might explain why.
Right now, this is going to be a condominium. So we are looking at what the possible market demand might be based on information that we received from our client and their marketing departments. That's how we based what we're providing.
Okay. And you're showing kind of the rear existing lane where you're expanding that. as a secondary parking entry. Was there a reason that you saw there was a need for the two vehicular entrances? And I'm wondering why the main entry off Jackson isn't sufficient.
We just, provided the option because the laneway is there. So we thought it'd be a good idea to actually utilize the laneway for more than just service vehicles. It makes the laneway in that it's being used, so people would tend to hang out there less if there is more movement in the laneway.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Thank you. And I was wondering also along Jackson, where you're neighboring that existing building, your building is kind of protruding further. I know that's kind of the way that the existing buildings are, but I was wondering if you'd looked at recessing that to match the existing to provide a more continuous street wall.
No, we didn't look at matching that exactly. It's something that we could review. We have pulled back, if we could just go back maybe to the ground floor, Matt. We have pulled back the ground floor so that it is aligned, like where our garage entry is. But then above, we've carried across the massing of our podium.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
I just build on that a little bit. The surface of that structured parking, so that's a parking structure at the back of the main tower, which is up towards Main Street, and the top portion of that is exposed parking. So there's no amenity on top of that parking deck. It's dedicated to surface parking for vehicles exposed to the elements. With that in mind, the increase in facade height there, we didn't find to be offensive to anyone on that side of the building as well.
Thank you.
I have one question, and this drawing maybe is a good one to talk about. The relocated heritage facade, does it match the footprint here where it kinks in into around that parcel room there? Is that the completion of that facade?
Yes, so it goes along the laneway and then south on Ferguson, and that return is based on the amount that it's moved south and west.
Right. There is another drawing where I think it's just all your roofs. Could you, it's a simpler drawing, it's not a full floor plan. So it looks to me like the red line in this drawing, I think that is the heritage facade, but then there's this area you have that's where the dark blue color extends beyond that to the south, where it says main entry.
Yeah, that's just a canopy. It's not
okay.
Enclosed space.
Okay, that's my only question. So I'm going to turn it over to the panelists for comments, and number one is Eldon.
Thank you for your presentation. Overall, I recognize that this is a pretty tight site. We're doing a lot of things, including integrating heritage and trying to meet a number of intensification objectives, but at the same time trying to achieve relationships. I appreciate the moves that you've made on the proposal. I appreciate the attempts that you've made to try and adhere to design principles in terms of separation and in terms of relationship to existing and emerging built form. I will encourage you as looking at the ground floor and looking at the animation and looking at where we have the amenity areas. If there is an opportunity to move some of that service area away from the public realm and more internal. I recognize that you have parking at the ground level, but if sometimes you need to seed the parking in order to amplify and improve that ground floor relationship. So if there's opportunities to do that in combination with what you've attempted to do to date with the amenity spaces and the retail spaces, I think that would be an improvement on both street frontages. Other than that, I don't have too many comments. I appreciate your proposal and thank you for presenting.
Thank you.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thank you. I agree with Eldon that you've done a lot of work to make this happen on an incredibly tight site. And to Jen Susson's point that you're providing more parking than is required. So there's 65 more spots than necessary. And I'm wondering if you can eliminate one floor, either below ground or maybe preferably parking above ground, and I know there's a cost analysis there that needs to happen, but this is a downtown site. Transit is nearby, and I'd advocate for reducing more parking than providing more than is required. Regarding the heritage salvation, I completely appreciate your interest and your efforts to relocate the heritage building there. Given that you're going to that effort to move and reconstruct, I think it could be either made stronger or more closely inform what else is going on in the podium. I think there's too many architectural approaches at the podium in brick, and either you could use the reclaimed brick to build it in a more modern vernacular, the way you're doing with the broader rectilinear framework on the more modern part, or simply keep the heritage part, make it very special, and then make the rest of the podium something very different in order to accentuate its reason for being there. Overall, I think there are many moves going on here, and the scheme would be stronger if there were fewer. The patterning, the stepping pattern on the tower is so iconic, and I think it would be clearer and stronger if there was more simplicity in the podium. And I know that's probably a challenging design exercise, but it feels to me that there are too many approaches here trying to come together. If we look at the elevations, there's a lot of stepping at the podium, and I think there's some relative contextual lines of heights of parapets and stuff that could be drawn on to make a more cohesive ground plane or pedestrian realm. Your project intentionally steps up and down from that urban datum, and I think it would be stronger if it was just a more gentle fitting into the context. We were asked by the design panel if the second and third floors, maybe we can flip to the plan of the second and third floors. Whoever's driving, yeah. That's the
third floor.
Third. And yeah. So we had a discussion in our pre-meeting here that it might be more successful if that indoor amenity space was residential units, and they could be moved from I think it's the fourth floor or seventh floor that opens to the terrace at the north side. Yeah, if those units on the left there that face the terrace were flipped down to the second floor, and then the amenity space was concentrated on a more a larger indoor and outdoor amenity saving or sharing space. It would bring more units down to the street perimeter and maybe make more privacy for those units that open up into, which could be a busy public outdoor space. Those are all my comments for now.
Jen Sisson.
Thank you. I want to say, first of all, that I agree with pretty much all of the comments that Eldon and Jennifer have made. I'm also happy to see the preservation of the heritage facades in tandem with the increased density that you're proposing here. But I do think that this design could do more to enhance the streetscape and the public realm. I am pleased to see the addition of the new street trees and that you've made an effort to preserve those existing street trees at the corner. However, I don't think that the vegetated buffer and the indoor amenity space on Jackson is really going to help animate the streetscape. There does seem to be more existing commercial and office space existing on the site, and maybe you know more about the success of that. But I would expect this site to support more retail than the footprint that you have, and I would encourage you to re-examine the potential for having additional commercial or retail spaces, particularly in the frontages along Jackson Street, which would be able to have a bit more glazing than the Jackson Street, or sorry, the Ferguson Street side. I also support the potential reduction of parking to allow some more of the inactive uses to shift inwards to make more space for active uses on the frontages. I do have a concern as well over the preliminary wind study. It didn't really have the level of detail I'd have liked to see to fully understand the impacts on the amenity spaces and the street. But it appears the southeast corner and Ferguson Avenue are going to have increased wind speeds. You may be able to mitigate some of that through design refinements, like stepping back the building, particularly on the Ferguson side, and using canopies at corners. And even additional vegetation may help to break up those downwashing winds, but that is an area that I'd encourage you to look at a little bit more while you're refining the design. In terms of shadow impacts, the proposed development is just touching Ferguson Station between 2 to 3 p.m. And per the development application guidelines, no net shadow is permitted between 10 to 4 on this area. So I'd say that area really should be looked at closely in the final design to make sure that it's not being impacted. Overall, I want to thank you for this development. And I look forward to seeing it built. Thanks.
So I don't have much to add. I agree with the observation that it seems like the additional parking is, in some ways, I think it's an opportunity. The areas you could reduce your parking and achieve some of these goals of increased ground level amenity, retail, and commercial along both streets, maybe flip some of your garbage areas and whatnot to the other side to allow for increased commercial or amenity space along Ferguson, and certainly move the amenity area off of the ground and up, on the floor plan that's in front of us here. I think those are both things that you should investigate. I think on the lower levels of the podium where you have parking, and in some areas, I think on the second floor, you have parking right against the Jackson, and you have sort of some amenity there. I think you should try and avoid having any parking on exposed above grade on either Ferguson or Jackson, and I think you can. Yeah, I think you have some flexibility within your parking numbers to make that happen. I agree with some of the comments that I guess Jennifer was saying about the complexity of the architectural composition that you have. The heritage components, the brick components of the base seem to be quite contrasting with the modern components above. There seems an opportunity for a little bit more compatibility investigation there. Again, quite an enthusiastic architectural statement with the stepping pattern. but it does seem that maybe some of the other components that are adjacent to it are they're just not invited to the party. It's like it's a pretty exciting tower, and I guess the less interesting tenants live down in the lower level or something. I don't know. I think I'd look to maybe try and get some of that excitement in the other elements, and so that the composition kind of, you're making a full statement on of that exuberance, if that's the, you know, if that's the statement, and it is pretty powerful otherwise. The one observation in the area as you go up the building, I just noticed that there is a unit that you have that's in the sort of inside corner on the lower levels that is almost windowless. It's just adjacent to your stair. It's a very tight little unit. I don't know whether you would consider making a larger, you know, combining it with some other units instead of having a little one with a very tiny slice of a balcony there. It seems unfortunate. And I guess the result of just trying to mash the tower into this mid-rise, there's kind of an awkward area that's created there. It's not really an urban design issue, but just something that you might want to take a look at. And also, I do think that the wind issues are quite concerning at the corner. The wind report doesn't seem very, seems pretty much of a warning there. And I think you have to take some more fundamental steps to try and avoid something that might be a problem in the future. Anyway, otherwise, I think you have a number of exciting ideas going, and look forward to seeing how this unfolds. It's not too often that we get projects that have extra parking, and so I think that I think you should respond to your owners or your clients' request, but I think you should also take advantage of that, and I think sculpt some more grade level amenity and street related excitement in the project. That would be great. I don't think we have any other comments other than, hi, David. He's a classmate of mine, so I haven't seen him in a while, so I just thought I'd say hi. There. Any questions that you have of us or a comment?
No, I think there are a lot of good points and things that we can look at, move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in our design review panel meeting. We'll close out and look forward to a September meeting. Thanks. Bye now.